Dear students, welcome to the course of Architecture and Town Planning. I am your teacher Ravinder Kumar Khyani, Assistant Professor, Department of Architecture and Planning, NLD University of Engineering and Technology, Karachi, Sindh, Pakistan. Today the topic of our discussion is urban ecology. What is an urban ecology? Let's discuss. The theme of current lecture is urban ecology. The phrase urban ecology is composed of two entirely different terms. One is urban, other is ecology. The one way to understand this theme is to look at both the terms individually and then try to establish a relationship between them. Whereas the other way to comprehend this phrase is to define it with an earlier established definition and identify its application in town planning. In the following, a detailed description of this theme is given for your understanding. What is urban? You already know what is urban, but let me repeat. The term urban means town or city, whereas a city is agglomerate social organism containing a population of at least 20,000, and that is the UN definition, in a relatively densely populated area that packages a critical population mass necessary for spawning a variety of value systems, lifestyles, and power constellations. This is the definition of urban. Now, cities are particularly receptive to and instrumental in creating innovation and change. Within this capacity for change is introduced various kinds of dysfunctional effects that include the cultural, the sociological, the economic, the psychological, and spiritual effect that occurs on the human beings because of the nature of an urban environment or overall physical, social, economic urban environment. What is ecology? Literally, the term ecology means a balance in nature. It is the study of ecosystems. Ecology is derived from the Greek word eco, used for household, and logos means life. So collectively, it means or it is the understanding of a household's life. It means how people are living in cities. And when we are saying living, living does not only mean living in a house and sleeping, but working and recreation. So living, working, and recreation. There are three main things that are significant. So how people are living their life in a city, and that is the ecology. Ecology is a systematic or synthetic study of an organism or a species and its surroundings. For example, one organism is of the human, other is of animals, the birds, the plants, and other, you can say, components of an urban environment. The basic unit of study in an ecological system is the interdependent population in any place, and they impact the ecosystem which they occupy, use, or visit. For example, when humans are living in a city, they are changing the natural environment and creating a built environment for them. And when they are creating the built environment, they affect the natural environment and its processes. So that is one of the basic unit of the study. So how people occupy a virgin land, how they use it or visit the place. In both history and natural history, ecology is the study of how organisms depend on one another and their surroundings. For example, the animals and birds are dependent on us and we are also dependent on them. Similarly, plants are also dependent on us and we are also dependent on the plants. So combining the urban plus ecology, what does it mean? If the terms urban and ecology combine together, it would mean a town or city where living organisms, species of flora and fauna, communities of humans survive together with interdependency and individualism within their surroundings. That is the urban ecology. In other words, the urban context where all kinds of people, plants, birds, and beasts exist together must live in a harmony. We should live in harmony with nature because they are the interdependent, and their survival with one another is in cohesiveness can be termed as urban ecology. So when we are saying urban ecology, we are giving life to sustain in cities, or we are giving chance to human beings, to animals, to birds, to plants, to other, you can say, living beings or non-living beings, or abiotic living biotic things in a city to survive together and flourish together. There is another description about the urban ecology. Urban ecology is the study of the relationship between organisms, including humans, and the particular opportunities for and challenges to their survival presented by cities. Because cities having a harsh life, it has a mechanical life, it has an artificial life, and this artificiality of the city affects the natural beings, or the you can say living beings, or the natural cycle. Urban ecology is the study of the biodiversity in areas that are densely populated by humans. So in urban ecology, we study about the birds, the plants, the animals, and human beings, and their social interaction and their survival with and without each other. Urban ecology is also the subfield of ecology which deals with the interaction of plants, animals, and humans with each other and with their environment in an urban or an urbanizing setting. So this is another definition of urban ecology. So I believe you have understood very well what is urban ecology. Let's see a small video about the urban ecology and you'll understand further.
Ecology is the relations of organisms with one another and with their physical surroundings. As such, ecology is the relations of organisms with one another and with their physical surroundings. As such, ecology is very broad in scope and encompasses an incredible variety of research questions. Research in ecology encompasses everything from the effects of weather patterns on animal migrations, how nutrients cycles in a pond, to how humans interact and influence their local environments. Because of the breadth of ecology's scope, it is often broken into subcategories like terrestrial ecology, behavioral ecology, and urban ecology. In this video, we will focus on urban ecology, which is the study of ecology where humans are abundant and have made significant changes to the local environment, such as cities. Urban ecology presents unique challenges to the scientists who study it because of the abundant anthropogenic or human influence. These challenges include potentially restricted access to study sites, human interference in these study sites, and the loss of study subjects due to human interference. Another interesting aspect of urban ecology is how fragmented or tiny a study can be. City parks are a great example of fragmented areas. Often, parks are the only available habitat for many species, and so those species can be confined to areas that are widely scattered throughout the city. City parks also tend to be quite small, which greatly limits the size and types of animals and plants that can survive in them. In spite of the challenges, studying the ecology of urban environments allows scientists to ask unique and interesting questions about the world that cannot be addressed in more wild environments. Questions like, how does a bird's song change in a noisy city environment? Or even, what is the best way to preserve an endangered species in an urban park? Are all part of urban ecology. These questions and others like them allow us to more fully explore and understand the urban environments in which over half the world's population resides. Urban ecology also helps us better understand the plants and animals that live alongside us in these environments. Can you think of some animals that are commonly found in urban environments? Pause the video and have a think. The list is too long, but some examples are rats, pigeons, dogs, cats, cockroaches, and even monkeys. While humans are generally the dominant species in an urban environment, they are hardly the only ones. Learning to live with other species in an urban environment and understanding how our activities affect those species is another important aspect of urban ecology. Regardless of the specific study in question, urban ecology helps us not only build our understanding of an urban environment, but also build better cities for humans and non-humans alike. So the next time
So when you are in the urban area, you find different kinds of natural environment. And that is basically because the dominance of built environment do not let you gaze at the natural environment. But we should in urban ecology focus on this natural environment aspect. Let's go ahead. Now let's discuss the significance of the urban ecology. The analysis of urban settings in the context of ecosystem ecology results in healthier, better managed communities because we are looking after every living being within an urban area. Studying the factors which allows wild plants and animals to survive and sometimes thrive in built environments can also create more livable spaces because we have a more livable or you can say interaction with the other living organisms. Urban ecology also involves the study of the effects of urban development patterns on ecological conditions, means how we are changing the virgin land when creating the built environment and what kind of effects we have on the natural environment and the species that exist, whether plant species, bird species, or the animal species. Emphasis is also placed on planning communities with environmentally sustainable methods via design and building materials in order to promote a healthy and biodiverse urban ecosystem. Furthermore, about significance of urban ecology, interaction between non-living factors such as sunlight or water and biological factors such as plants and microbes take place in all environments, including the cities. By concentrating humans and resources they consume, metropolitan areas alter the soil, drainage, water flow, and the light availability within the cities. The urban ecologists think of how architecture, such as the sidewalk and rooftops, impact the way the rainwater is received and transported, and the way garbage dumps and sewage plants centralize waste products. So basically, urban ecologists think about the such architecture which is a sustainable architecture, and this town planning which is sustainable town planning. Some species of animals have been able to survive or thrive in a non-natural urban setting. For example, rats, pigeons, and cockroaches are more survivors within the built environment. So we must study these living organisms. Now let's see, there is another concept of urban ecological footprint. Now, there are international institutions or organizations which think that every city must have an ecological footprint and we must know that where we are standing. So, here is a small video about urban ecological footprints.
Nearly every nation has committed to reducing its carbon footprint. But this is no simple undertaking. For example, let's say part of your country's plan is to restore forest land to sequester carbon. This should lead to a reduction in net carbon emissions. However, this may also reduce cropland and therefore your country's ability to produce its own food. Global Footprint Net. Nearly every nation has committed to reducing its carbon footprint. But this is no simple undertaking. For example, let's say part of your country's plan is to restore forest land to sequester carbon. This should lead to a reduction in net carbon emissions. However, this may also reduce cropland and therefore your country's ability to produce its own food. Global Footprint Network measures more than just a country's carbon footprint. Our national footprint accounts can provide a comprehensive way to better understand the links between competing demands on our planet. Our accounts help national governments understand and manage their natural resources to help them make confident policy decisions and create a prosperous, resilient future for their residents. They provide an ecological balance sheet for each country. The footprint accounts measure a country's annual demand for the goods and services that its land and seas can provide. We then compare that to the resources available, which we call biocapacity. This information can be used to identify which countries are using more ecological resources and services than they have, who we call ecological debtors, and those with more resources than they're using. We call them ecological creditors. Government leaders from the United Arab Emirates, the Philippines, and Montenegro are using our data to develop and evaluate sustainability policy. And thousands of scientists and students from around the world have downloaded our data to research everything from socioeconomic indicators to land use patterns. Our footprint accounts are based on nearly 200,000 data points per country per year. Data has been compiled since 1961, allowing
So here you will understand the concept of ecological footprint. Every country have different level of natural resources which are consumed without considering about the future. For example, we have gas, we have natural gas available, and we are using it, you can say, without considering that for how long it is going to give us the support. Because you see, this is very important, because in urban area we have natural gas, so we use it in the cars, we also use it in the homes, we also use it in the industry. So if we have a gas, we just use it without considering what are its impacts. So this is very important issue. Now furthermore, I just like to tell you one more thing. Just consider this earth as a spaceship in the universe, a spaceship with a limited resources, you know. So with limited resources and population increasing day by day, so and remote resources are not renewing itself by that time. So in the long run, the human survival will be difficult. So it is important that we must have understanding about the urban ecological footprint. Let's go ahead. Finally, I must conclude, why urban ecology emerged, what is its purpose, and how it is related to the town planning especially. Now let's begin. Urban ecology is basically a response to combined pressure of urbanization, population growth, and global environmental climate change. To understand how ecosystem can be managed sustainably, we need to understand the response of humans and other components of ecosystems within urbanized systems. Now, urban ecology is the domain of knowledge which is very young and come out of the 150 years old field of traditional ecology. The ecology field or scientific discipline take the perspective and approach of a natural environment. For example, the circle that I have drawn here is representing the natural environment, where you find that humans are outside, or they are placed outside the ecological system. That is the traditional ecological studies. So if the circle describes the boundary of an ecosystem, then human is here outside, not part of the dynamic ecosystem. So that is the traditional urban ecology, traditional ecology, sorry. So urban ecology, on the other hand, in contrast, focus specifically the human dominated landscape or cities and urbanized areas and urbanized regions. And in urban ecology, we specifically and intentionally focus on humans as the integral and fundamental elements of the system. So we move humans here inside the ecosystem, just like any other fundamental components and interactive elements of the ecosystem, such as plants, animals, birds, fungi, or abiotic components that are studied in the ecosystem. Now, we have fundamental approaches in urban ecology. Now, there are two principal approaches in urban ecology. One is the ecology in cities and urban regions. Then, the important thing here is that the ecology in cities, and by city, we mean urban regions and urbanized areas. In this approach, we apply a traditional ecology approach to urban systems. In this approach, we study the interaction between urban soils and how they affect the plant settlements and communities in the context of cities, or an ecological succession into urban vacant plot as traditional ecology means how we are changing the land and land resources. Now, urban ecology has another approach, and that is the ecology of cities and urban regions. Now, this second approach of urban ecology is entirely different. Here, human ecology takes a system approach to study urban social ecological system, and we investigate the combined interactions of three interacting components. So we take system approach in ecology, and now we look into it, and there are three things that are important. So we look at the combined interaction of these three interacting components: the social, the built, and biophysical environment. Now, this system approach views the city as an urban system, and it takes a systems thinking, not focusing on the individual components as we described in ecology in cities, but rather ecology of entire city as an ecosystem. So when we take a city as ecosystem, and by taking the systems approach, we can use the socio-ecological systems to focus on the dynamic feedback between the interacting components. Now this is an urban system and the interaction of the system. So we focus on the dynamic feedback between interacting components of the system. Now this viewpoint do something different for us. It allows us to understand the processes and the patterns that we see in the entire system. By doing that, we can measure the resilience of the system, and we can understand that whether or not the system can be sustainably managed, or how can we improve that kind of management. So the goal here is to use the sociological system approach to drive a new theory of cities. Now in this approach, we drive new theory of cities by looking at the entire, you can say, empirical data and empirical studies, focusing on the dynamic feedbacks between the interacting components of urban system, including humans as a driver of the system. And this new information and new tools that we develop can help us better design of our urban spaces and do the better town planning, and develop new kind of changes in urban systems to make them more resilient and understandable. So here you understood that why urban ecology is important to understand and how it is related to the town planning. Now let's look at that how people around the world think about the future of the cities and urban ecology.
This is the sound of a garbage truck in Taipei, a subway in Seoul, 3:30 in Santiago, Auckland, Singapore, Copenhagen, Los Angeles, Sydney, London, Nairobi, Venice, Shenzhen, Kuwait City, Mumbai, and Songdo. That's in South Korea. Awfully quiet. I ended up here because I was looking for the city of tomorrow. Songdo is the largest private real estate development in history. It's a master planned and entirely state-of-the-art smart city. While Songdo doesn't look like that future, some believe it's the future we need.
It's only impossible until someone does it.
It's also where they shot
Oppan Gangnam Style.
Just 25 years ago, Psy would have been dancing on this. Here are some other cities built on water.
There is a race to build a functioning, workable city and to replicate that model all over the world.
China alone would require 500 Songdos to sustain their growing population. So how do we get here with an entire industry racing to build smart cities from scratch?
Technology is the answer, but what is the question?
Good question, Carlo. Are we just building cities of the future so we can have cities of the future? Let's take a step back. When cinema was born, only 14% of the world's population lived in cities. Right now, we're at 54%, and this is where we're headed.
Cities today are growing at a pace that none of us have ever understood.
Now, that's a huge deal when you think about it, because the resources that built the megacities of the 20th century aren't sustainable today.
We do damage to nature, and we do less damage to nature when we occupy less of it.
We're not going to make our planet grow and thrive by continuing to sprawl out.
They're basically saying that when density is done right, it's the best, if not the only, solution to our growing climate crisis. So is future urbanization going to be a good thing or a bad thing? If you care about people, this is the defining question of our time. The Nantucket Project asked me to explore that question, because that's what they do, explore. So I read books, talked to experts, traveled around the world, asked the internet for help, and got responses from people in all these cities.
This is Lucas, we met on YouTube.
They'd show me around, and when I couldn't visit in person, they'd send me footage. The best thing about cities and the internet is they connect people. So this movie's about exploring what an even more connected urban future could look like.
There is a renaissance in the city, and I'm honored to be a participant in the Detroit story.
That was Mayor Jerome Kavanaugh making a bid for the 1968 Olympics. 50 years later, population still in decline, Detroit went bankrupt.
In 2014, we had the water shutoffs in Detroit.
Thousands of homes lost water due to shutoffs.
And I wanted to focus on helping resolve that. So I created an application called City Water that's going to give Detroit residents their water usage in real time.
That might sound boring compared to a drone delivering your pizza, but let's remember that cities only reached their full potential when they became healthier places to live.
At the start of the 20th century, America's cities were spending as much on water as the federal government was spending on everything except for the post office and the army.
We've come a long way to an exciting era.
This is Abbas. He saw my video announcing the project and wanted to make sure his city made the cut.
I was born here, and I'm really passionate about bringing the city back to the point it was. We're no Silicon Valley, but we're trying to become a city that brings tools and brings solutions and brings jobs back.
Detroit is his company's first client. That means they're using data to prevent this kind of thing.
When the citizens say, I don't need to have a smart city, but whatever new innovation it comes, if it helps me, I'm going to embrace it.
And it's really encouraging just the fact that the city is willing to do a project like this. And we're hoping to launch that in January of 2017 and take that to other cities across the country.
Because cities inherently just don't compete with each other, there's a huge opportunity to collaborate with other cities.
We could take the best practices in sustainable urbanization and spread them around the world as quickly as possible. That is the promise of the 21st century of urbanization.
It's easy to imagine adopting Abbas's app in Santiago. And Los Angeles is a city that's never taken water for granted.
Well, what can we do? The rest of the city needs drinking water.
Water again.
We use water from 1,400 miles away that is transported long distances using over 19% of our entire energy budget for the state of California.
David uses solar power to turn air into clean water, which he gives away for free to his city or sometimes turns into food. Awesome.
Every building, ideally, can make its own water and be water self-reliant.
In the same way future cities won't need telephone lines, maybe they also won't need water pipes.
You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Be water, my friend. Like that, you see?
Oh, I see, I get the idea.
When people are innovating and developing solutions to address our most fundamental needs, a city will thrive.
What kind of cities do we want? How do we want to interact as people in cities? Because cities aren't buildings, they're people.
Part of the job of urban success means to attract and produce skilled people and to retain skilled talent.
This goes together in a city. Opportunity and solving problems as they arise, innovating.
Detroit is innovating right now, probably kind of like the way it was in the 1890s, when over 100 companies were working furiously to figure out the automobile. That's also like Silicon Valley in the 60s and 70s, Bangalore in the 80s, and Shenzhen, where 90% of the world's drones are manufactured right now.
There's at least 26% of the technology from Silicon Valley actually come from Shenzhen.
Cities are more complicated than the headlines they make on the other side of the world. There's no YouTube in Shenzhen, so nobody saw my video there. Fortunately, George goes to school in Hong Kong, where he saw the movie and emailed me. Then he filmed Shenzhen when he went home on the weekend. Thanks, George. Like Songdo, Shenzhen was not a city 25 years ago. And like many other cities, they built giant American-style highways.
Currently, the U.S. has policies that we're using general tax revenues to fund highways. We're basically subsidizing people to drive.
And that's why it's cheaper to drive to the grocery store to buy blueberries from 4,000 miles away than it is to walk over to the farmer's market and buy local.
Can you tell I'm eating blueberries?
You can tell you're eating what you got.
Okay, cool. Our subsidies and policies encourage bad habits, but the false message we send globally is that big highways solve problems.
Transportation's been a very sleepy field for 50 years. You're starting to see people rethink what our streets are about and who they're for.
Now cities are spending money getting rid of highways, confirming that more transportation choices and less parking are often the best ways to fight traffic and congestion.
This used to be a motorway, now it's a public space. So you got green space, shade, clean water, natural cooler temperature in the area, and sure enough, traffic got better.
Seoul is turning another highway into a path for people. Paris is going full pedestrian along the Seine. In Singapore, where they just debuted a self-driving taxi, they're also building a city with no cars. Same thing in
Mannheim, Germany.
Which, ironically, is where this guy invented the first car.
The future of our cities is about people. That really does mean focusing on public transportation and providing choices for how people get around.
The number one factor that determines whether someone can escape poverty, you either think it'd be like crime rates or school, it's commute time.
When walking, cycling, and public transportation are the fastest ways to move, nobody feels like a second-class citizen for not owning a car.
That's going to be the secret sauce for cities in the 21st century.
Check out all these Metro cards. That last one's from Singapore, where I didn't meet a single person who owns a car.
It's hard to beat the Singaporeans.
In Singapore, a Toyota Corolla costs 140 grand, and the government only lets you lease it for 10 years.
The fact that they embrace having something that actually charges people for the social cost of their driving is a policy that basically all crowded cities should be embracing.
In Santiago, you can get around in this electric rickshaw for free. The design came from China. Let's go back there. I actually never went to Shenzhen.
Nice meeting you over the internet.
George and Nina shot the interview and I tuned in on Skype. Remember those giant American-style highways? That's what Shenzhen had in mind when they hired Vicky.
We proposed to them a very different idea. Instead of increasing the highway, we reduce it. And then we prepared for a city where people can actually use more high-speed self-driving car. People can actually use drones to deliver daily grocery.
Hiding cars in tunnels points towards a city made for people. Maybe we could try this in Los Angeles. Considering how quickly China went from this to that, and from that to this, it's not surprising this project is happening in Shenzhen.
The excitement of a happening place which attracts people, you have to have a degree of openness and not too much regulation.
Shenzhen spends more time making things than hiring patent lawyers to protect them.
In the West, it's called theft. Out here, it's called sharing.
And if you want to know more about that, you should watch my friend Jim's documentary. The point is, it's exciting to live in a city where people are making things. That's why I moved to New York, because I was drawn to all these people who were doing more with less. The most elusive solutions often spring from unlikely places.
Geothermal energy power plant.
This is a fog catcher, and it can get up to 500 liters of water a day.
If you can do something good with low budget resources, you can scale up very rapidly.
Sometimes those solutions can end up shaping a city's identity. In Lagos, which is where this music is from, by the way, they call it kanju.
The word literally means like hustling. Trying to reimagine these challenges in Africa as opportunities to innovate is the spirit of Kanju.
Flooding is an issue in Makoko, so they built a school that floats by using cheap and available materials. This woman turns discarded plastic into bricks in Karachi. In Nairobi, nobody uses credit cards or cash. All you need is a phone. In Manila, they turn water bottles into solar light bulbs. And the people of India have always made more out of less. The inexpensive clay fridge that requires no electricity or their hyper-efficient, massive homemade meal delivery system could never have been conceived by some well-heeled think tank. Dr. Joachim has lived in the slums for 50 years, built 1 million houses and toilets, been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, and brought his organization, Slum Dwellers International, to 43 different countries.
We don't need you to come and sit on my head and dance. I know how to write my song. It is my dance, my song, I will play it.
He's basically saying, we got this. If you want to help, channel your support through us. For example, here's a self-run recycling operation in Joachim's neighborhood. We all want to be involved in the futures of the places where we live.
You go and see every city in the world. All has been planned by very, very super, well-known, renowned architect and philosopher and so on and so forth. You have lost all the sense of hearing from the people.
Unfortunately, a lot of architects have a sort of a pre-designed approach that they force into whatever context and culture they get to.
And not every city can be like Singapore, where 80% of the people live in public housing.
So that means you don't have slums, nor do you leave the city and its residents in the hands of the private rental sector.
Back to Mumbai. We tend to disregard places like Dharavi, where Dr. Jochum lives, but it's a rare example of a neighborhood solving its own housing needs. My friend Matthias works to draw attention to what's actually working in neighborhoods before attempting to intervene. He compares Mumbai to post-war Tokyo.
American planners decided to focus on infrastructure development. Everything else was left to people themselves. And that created the gradual growth of a neighborhood.
Like Tokyo in the 1950s, it's your neighbors planning and building your home in Dharavi.
Up to 90 people can be working on a small site for 4 weeks and produce a house of much better quality than the affordable housing that the government is developing.
And embodying the kind of incremental growth private developers rarely aim for.
The places that are self-built, we often see an incredible amount of care, feeling of ownership, a human scale in terms of what is actually being built.
How do we combine the genius that's really there in the streets, it's solving its own problem? How do we then bring in a little bit of outside technology or better public management in order to upgrade them and to empower their citizens' lives more effectively?
Post-war Tokyo, unlike Mumbai, had major funding and state-of-the-art infrastructure. And 30 years later, it was the city of the future.
That's not my kind of place.
Go someplace else.
I don't think so, Mr. Deckard.
Around the same time that Tokyo was booming, Copenhagen was struggling.
In the 70s, we had a couple of energy crises. People started to fight for getting better bicycle infrastructure, and the city gradually started developing that mobility system.
In many ways, it is Copenhageners who have wanted to get their city back.
Denmark's capital insists on citizen-driven change.
I think part of Copenhagen's success is that they've had a very incremental approach to the urban development. Instead of having this giant master plan, they've tested and tried out different solutions.
Low-rise, mixed-use neighborhoods, great public space, clean water. This new power plant turns waste into clean energy. And it's a ski slope.
We don't think ourselves only as designers and architects. We think about ourselves also as social scientists.
The best part is they still think they can do better.
We have very far to go in actually creating an urban environment where cars are the last choice for the ordinary citizen.
If you buy a car in Denmark, you pay 150% tax. It doesn't matter if it's electric.
Destination, please.
I'm super excited about self-driving cars, but without good planning and policy, we might just end up being more comfortable sitting in traffic jams.
For a collection of microprocessors, you're awfully touchy.
Of course, it's possible to make any city around the world a good bicycle city.
And the more we get public transit, the more room there'll be for one of the very best kinds, bicycles.
You could start with getting more people mobilized on foot and on bicycle, and it's so cheap to be sweet to people than it is to actually having to support these heavy transport systems.
A person on a bike puts 65,000. A person on a bike puts a fraction of the wear and tear that the average car puts on the road. And as you'll remember, roads don't pay for themselves. Since I started editing this project, New York City Bike has broken daily ridership records 6 times. And the cool part is you can see all the data gathered from the program in real time.
In the past, our streets have really been governed by anecdotes instead of analysis. And so we brought very focused, data-driven approaches to analyze the impacts of our projects.
And so really seeing how we can take technology and not kind of replace what we're able to do, but kind of enhance our ability to interact with our environments.
Well, then what do you want to do?
I don't know, something.
Wow.
Some think that technology is going to make us more physically isolated.
People will stop moving around.
Right.
They just won't need to. You basically connect your brain to the internet and you turn off your senses, and the senses come from the internet. And so you could feel this exact setting. Why would you get in a car? Why would you get on a plane?
I just couldn't imagine that, and the whole point of this video was to go to real places and connect with real people, mostly in person. I also made this video with these people and for these people. It's kind of like a city. Thinking hard about who we're making them for and who we're changing them with is always a good starting point.
Super tired.
Okay, I'm exhausted. I'm sure you're exhausted. And I barely scratched the surface, but that's what I got. Bye-bye, Copenhageners. Bye, Singaporeans. Bye, Songdonians. Bye, Mumbaiakers. I'm going to leave you with this quote from the great Jane Jacobs. Lowly, unpurposeful, and random as they may appear, sidewalk contacts are the small change from which a city's wealth of public life may grow. Cities remind us how much we benefit from and actually desire to share physical space with other people. But that doesn't mean one city can't learn from another. And the speed at which we're sharing what we're learning, the speed at which I connected with an army of filmmakers all over the world to make this video, was the most encouraging part of the experience. And while every city was exciting, it was the people in every city that made me optimistic for the future.
So you have seen that how people around the world come together for the betterment of cities and have a sustainable future. Finally, I must acknowledge the authors behind this lecture. I have read these books and learned from them and deliver this lecture to you. Thanks for watching. For lecture notes, visit my blog www.townplanninglectures.blogspot.com. Thank you very much for listening once again. And class is over now, so be happy and run for the fun. Good luck and goodbye.